June 2025. With the stroke of a pen, President Trump reignited one of the most controversial debates in modern American history. His sweeping executive proclamation completely banned U.S. visa issuance for nationals from 10 Asian countries, citing national security risks, massive visa overstays, and foreign manipulation of American systems. The fallout? Explosive, immediate, global. The new travel restrictions have shut out over 1.4 billion people from entering the United States, slashing international student flows, disrupting remittances, halting business ties, and fueling backlash from foreign governments. Is this really about safety? Or is it about building walls in an already divided world? One thing is certain, the world is watching and the stakes couldn't be higher. With international travel contributing $2.9 trillion annually to the global economy and millions of jobs hanging in the balance, this ban may just be the boldest and most dangerous immigration move in U.S. history. Let's count down the 10 Asian countries completely banned from U.S. visas in 2025 and expose the shocking reasons behind each decision. What's happening might surprise you. But what comes next could shock you. Number 10, China. With population around 1.41 billion and GDP more than 18 trillion. They had a visa rejection rate of 42%. Once the epicenter of U.S. academic exchanges, business summits, and cultural diplomacy, China has been sliced out of the American travel map entirely in 2025. The ban, enacted under the Trump administration, extends across all visa categories from tourist visas to F1 student visas, even to B1, B2 business and conference entries. No exceptions, no waivers, no negotiations. Chinese nationals historically made up the largest population of international students in the U.S., with over 290, zero enrolled in 2023 alone. That's now zero. Institutions like Harvard, Stanford, and MIT are already projecting massive revenue losses while Chinese tech and finance giants are pulling back from U.S. partnerships. A $15 billion blow to the American economy? That's the conservative estimate. But here's where it gets explosive. The Trump administration labeled Chinese visa applicants as national security threats due to alleged ties to the Chinese Communist Party, cyber, espionage claims, and intellectual theft. The blanket policy ignores the fact that millions of Chinese travelers and students had no ties to the government whatsoever. And now, the Chinese government has retaliated with a reciprocal ban on American travelers. U.S.-China relations have entered a new Cold War, but this time, it's not just ideological, it's economic. Is this the beginning of a global decoupling? Or a calculated political stunt gone too far? Number 9, Iran. With population around 83 million and a GDP of 250 billion, but they had visa rejection rate of 53%. Iran's inclusion in the 2025 visa ban comes as no surprise, but its timing is explosive. Amid ongoing nuclear negotiations, economic sanctions, and tense military posturing in the Gulf, the Trump administration took the bold step of cutting off all visa access, officially labeling Iran as a hostile actor with terror ties. What does that mean on the ground? Iranians hoping to visit sick relatives, attend academic conferences, or escape persecution have now been cut off entirely. The rejection rate has hit 100%, with thousands of cases administratively closed at U.S. consulates in Turkey and the UAE. The irony? Many of those affected are Western-leaning, pro-democracy Iranians, often from the intellectual elite or persecuted minorities like the Baha'i or Kurdish communities. For them, America was a beacon of safety and freedom until now. As inflation in Iran skyrockets past 50%, and with the nation desperate for international collaboration, critics argue this ban serves no real strategic purpose beyond grandstanding for political theater. But here's the real question. Is punishing civilians for the sins of their regime ever justified? Number 8, Pakistan. With population around population 240 million and GDP of 350 billion, but they have visa rejection rate of 41%. Once hailed as a strategic partner in the fight against terrorism, Pakistan now finds itself locked out of America. Trump's 2025 proclamation cites increased radicalization, espionage threats, and document fraud as justifications for the total ban, but critics say it's more about politics than policy. Before the ban, Pakistani Americans were already facing intense scrutiny, with visa rejections jumping by over 40% in just 2 years. But now, every application is automatically denied. Business ties with Silicon Valley are eroding, and student exchanges have evaporated. The result? A vacuum of trust and shattered diplomatic bridges. Perhaps most devastating is the impact on remittance flows. Pakistani immigrants in the U.S. sent over $4 billion annually back home, funding education, healthcare, and housing. With that now cut off, millions of families face economic devastation. The backlash has been fierce. In Islamabad, U.S. embassies are facing mass protests, and Pakistan has suspended defense cooperation and intelligence sharing with Washington. Is America burning bridges with one of South Asia's most nuclear-capable nations at the worst possible moment? Number 7. Afghanistan. With population of 40 million people and GDP of 20 billion and had a visa rejection rate of estimated 85%. After 2 decades of war, thousands of Afghan translators, aid workers, and pro-US collaborators were promised safety. But in 2025, those promises were torched. The visa ban now ensures that even US allied Afghans can no longer enter America. This is more than a ban, it's a betrayal. Many Afghans risked their lives assisting American troops, trusting the US would honor its commitments. But now, stranded in Taliban-controlled zones, their pleas for asylum are ignored. The official reason? Unstable security environments and high overstay risks. But human rights groups argue it's a political abandonment, driven by optics, not facts. Afghanistan's collapse is America's responsibility. So why slam the door shut now? Veterans groups across the U.S. are outraged, calling it a stain on America's honor. One soldier's quote went viral, "We left our brothers behind." The visa ban isn't just policy, it's a haunting echo of unfinished wars. Number 6. Syria. With population around 18 million and GDP of 60 billion, but had a visa rejection rate over 90%. Syria has long been a flashpoint in global geopolitics, but in 2025, the US officially declared it a complete visa no-go zone. No refugees, no students, no reunifications. Zero exceptions. Already ravaged by civil war, Syrians were fleeing towards safety and many sought shelter in the US. But now, their only legal path has been obliterated. According to UNHCR, over 7 million Syrians remain displaced, and the US once admitted thousands per year. That number is now 0. Washington's justification? Terrorism risks. But that rationale paints an entire nation with the brush of extremism, even children, orphans, and humanitarian scholars. And the damage isn't just emotional, it's political. The ban has triggered a wave of anti-US sentiment across the Middle East. And here's the chilling part. As Syria becomes more reliant on Iranian and Russian support, America loses soft power leverage in the region. Is shutting out Syria helping or hastening a geopolitical collapse? Number 5. Bangladesh. With a population hovering around 170 million, Bangladesh has long been a quiet economic engine of South Asia. Its booming garment industry, rapidly expanding digital sector, and labor exports have earned it global relevance. But in 2025, the US abruptly suspended all visa processing for Bangladeshi nationals, plunging families, students, and entrepreneurs into chaos. The justification? Severe visa overstay rates, fraudulent documentation, and political instability. Yet, the ban has been blasted as overkill. Bangladeshi students were on track to surpass 15 zero enrollees in U.S. universities this year, contributing hundreds of millions in tuition. Now, that entire pipeline is severed. And let's not forget, Remittances from the US have historically played a critical role in Bangladesh's economy, often used to fund healthcare, housing, and education for the country's poor. The irony? The majority of Bangladeshis entering the US came legally through work or student programs and most returned home. But under Trump's zero-tolerance policy, the outliers have been used to justify a complete national shutdown. Back in Dhaka, anti-US protests are swelling, American flags are burning in front of diplomatic missions, and the Bangladeshi government is threatening to suspend US garment imports, a move that could disrupt supply chains for major US brands like Gap and Walmart. Is America ready to pay that price for political theater? Number 4. Myanmar, Burma. Myanmar, a nation of about 55 million, has been reeling from civil war, ethnic cleansing, and military dictatorship, but now the US has made it official. No Burmese nationals will be granted visas of any kind. That includes students, asylum seekers, and even family reunification applicants. The 2025 proclamation bluntly labels Myanmar a zone of collapsed governance and mass migration abuse. But to critics, that language is not only dehumanizing, it's deliberately cruel. Thousands of Rohingya Muslims, already displaced by genocidal violence, have had their final hope of US refuge ripped away. This ban slams the door on a humanitarian crisis, not because of risk, but because of convenience. The US processed less than 50 visas from Myanmar in 2024, hardly a flood. But now, even that humanitarian trickle has been shut off. Human rights groups are outraged, calling the move a moral collapse masquerading as immigration policy. More disturbing is the geopolitical fallout. Myanmar is now embracing Chinese infrastructure, investment, and Russian arms sales more aggressively than ever. By isolating vulnerable nations like this, is the US simply pushing them into the hands of its adversaries? Number 3. North Korea. Addition to the visa ban list is not shocking, but what is shocking is the sheer scope of the policy. In previous years, North Korean visas were rare, but not impossible. Humanitarian workers, journalists, and defectors had limited pathways to enter the US or seek asylum. Now, even those have been eliminated. With a population of about 26 million, most North Koreans live under a totalitarian regime with no freedom of travel, but ironically, the US ban ensures that even the small number of escapees can't find shelter in America. President Trump's administration claims the move is to close all potential backdoors for espionage and infiltration. But critics argue it's more about optics than substance. North Korean asylum seekers have typically gone through rigorous screening processes, often taking years. Closing this route punishes the most vulnerable people on the planet. The real losers? Human rights NGOs and missionary organizations that have long operated relief networks in the Korean peninsula. Their US-based staff can no longer travel for aid work. In the name of security, is America abandoning its moral leadership? Number 2. Indonesia. Indonesia, with a staggering 280 million people, is the largest Muslim-majority country in the world and a vital strategic partner in Southeast Asia. So, when Trump's administration included Indonesia in the 2025 visa ban, the global shock was immediate. The ban cited systemic document fraud, increased Islamist radicalization, and failure to repatriate deportees as its rationale. But analysts point out that these justifications were not backed by data. Indonesia's actual overstay rate was lower than several Latin American nations still allowed access. The fallout? Tens of thousands of Indonesian students, tech workers, and religious pilgrims have been cut off from the US overnight. Several Ivy League universities reported that their Indonesian enrollment has plummeted to zero. Worse, Silicon Valley firms employing Indonesian engineers are now scrambling to navigate sudden visa cancellations. In Jakarta, the backlash has reached fever pitch. Anti-US sentiment has exploded online, while the Indonesian government has suspended military cooperation and naval exercises with the US. Pacific Command. Diplomats warn that the US may be pushing away a vital ally right into China's orbit. Number 1. India. Yes, India, the world's most populous country, a supposed US ally, and the crown jewel of tech-driven migration, has officially been added to the visa ban list in 2025. The backlash has been seismic. With over 1.4 billion citizens and more than 500 Indian students and tech workers living in the US, this is the most consequential immigration decision in decades. Why the ban? Trump's executive order accused India of systemic visa abuse, fraud rings in the H-1B system, and failure to cooperate with US deportation orders. Indian nationals have long dominated STEM fields, accounting for more than 70% of H-1B visa holders. Now, those visas are being revoked or frozen en masse, with no pathway for renewal. Silicon Valley is in crisis, with firms like Google and Microsoft warning of severe operational disruptions. The emotional toll is just as devastating. Families are being torn apart, weddings canceled, funerals missed. And in India, anti-American protests have erupted from Delhi to Mumbai. Parliament is debating trade retaliation and suspension of defense pacts. The world's largest democracy has just been publicly humiliated, and it won't forget. Is this how the US treats its so-called partners? Or is this a deliberate act of provocation to cement a hardline, nationalist agenda at home? Let's be clear, this isn't about border control anymore. This is about geopolitical realignment, economic self-sabotage, and diplomatic collapse. The 2025 visa bans may be framed as a defense of American sovereignty, but in reality, they represent the sharpest turn inward in modern US history. Over 2 billion people, yes, 2 billion have now been barred from setting foot in the United States. That means less innovation, fewer students, lost business deals, broken families, and weakened alliances. This isn't protecting America, it's isolating it. And here's the kicker. While Washington builds walls, Beijing and Moscow are building influence. They're welcoming the very students, workers, and partners America has cast aside. The US may be closing its doors, but the world isn't waiting around. So ask yourself, are these bans making America safer, or just smaller, weaker, and more alone?